staying consistent, I move with the clock. I'm in the zone, I'm not casting a stone. I'm finna stand on a rock, firm foundation. I got that dog in me, like 101 Dalmatian. I got girl with me, so I knew that I'm still finna make it. I'm still finna take it. I hopped in the ring and I'm still going crazy. I cut off this sin like I just got a taper. I walk in the storm and then God gave me favor. I'm still going forward. I just had to lock in the Lord. I knew that I'm finna make it. Doing my old self, he got deported. Shout out to the king and I'm finna take
Let's get it. What's going on, everybody? I'm your host, Zach Shoemaker, as a lot of people know me as SchuZ. And yeah, it's kind of a late episode for whoever is going to be tuning into this live. This obviously will be available to be seen whenever you guys want, following this interview or following the show, I should say. And so I'm just thankful for whoever decides to tune in at this point in the night or morning, wherever that you might be. Obviously, the shows typically and going forward for the most part will be on Monday and Thursdays. This time was a little bit different. I wasn't able to get to the show to make it happen on Monday, but I decided to go and still get it in on this Tuesday. At least that's where I'm at. It's still Tuesday. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in and taking time to listen and come on and listen to this show today. So throughout this show, it's going to be a typical show. I'm going to get into Eternal Echoes. I'll be breaking down the verse of the day. We'll get into Combat Currents. We'll be breaking down a lot of big-time fighting news that's been coming out over the past few days since the Thursday show. Also, beginning to Hardwood Realities, in which I'll be discussing and breaking down basketball discussions and stuff going on from around the league today. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in once again. I hope you guys enjoy this show. Once again, I'm your host, Zach SchuZ Shoemaker, and this is going to be a great show. First and foremost, the very first segment of this show, which I'm going to be getting into, is discussing the verse of the day, and that'll be broken down then in the Eternal Echoes segment. So I hope you guys all had a great weekend, and with that being said, let's get right into this show. So the verse of the day today, as you guys can see going across the bottom of your screens, is John chapter 1, verse 5, in which it reads this: "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." You read that, and the believers that have read the Word of God are well aware of the emphasis that's placed on being the light, how God is the light, Jesus was the light in the world, and we hear this phrase so often. And the reason this verse stuck out to me and became something in which I wanted to speak about is because I don't think as believers we're taking that idea literally. You know, I don't think a lot of us are understanding. I don't think a lot of us understand the power of it. And I don't think we're truly grasping just how impactful being the light is, or maybe some of us don't even know what we're being called to actually do and how to do it. And that's what I want to break down for you guys today. Because I look around the world today, and you may or may not agree with me in this aspect, but I believe that as believers, we are getting to be complaining way too much. And those of us that know the Word of God know, well, why are we supposed to be complaining? We got all that we need, and yet we're complaining, and I think honestly it's too much, and we're all accountable in this aspect, in this regard. But I look through this, and you know, I see that yes, there's a lot of darkness in the world. But those of us that are in the Word, we're well aware that darkness was always going to be here since the fall of mankind. It was in and throughout the Bible, and we were then told it's going to happen up until the very end of the earth. And so darkness should not be something that we're afraid of, nor shall it be something in which we are caught off guard by. This was going to be here, but what we are told about is a cure to the darkness. You know, a lot of us like cures, you know, anything that possibly could get an illness away from us of any extent or to any degree. We would like to be interested in that cure. But it seems that as believers, we're not taking the cure for what can be the answer to darkness in this world and evil. We're not utilizing it to what we're told we could do and utilize, but we're not doing so. And I started brainstorming why could this be? Why do so many of us not want to be the light? Well, I thought maybe some of us just don't think it's going to work. But, you know, I don't think that's the truth. That might be what you're telling yourself, and I can say this from personal experience because, well, this is the exact story I went through. You know, for so long I wanted to say, you know, it's just not going to matter, I don't need to do it, so on and so forth. But was not the root for why I did not want to be the light beforehand. I don't think that's the root for why a lot of us sitting here and listening to this today don't want to be the light. You know, I think a lot of us think this, that maybe it might just be the case that you're not having full faith in God. Because if you don't fully believe in the goodness and the good news of God, then why would you go share them and be the light? And I can reflect on that because that was certainly my story, my testimony for a very long time. But I go through this now and I recognize that regardless of who you are, where you're at, and how often you like to be the light, we all certainly have a lot of room for improvement. We all need to get better at being the light. And that's what I want to get into today. Because a lot of us, I feel like, doubt the capabilities and the power of the light. And I want to give you guys an understanding of just how impactful that is. So for those of you that doubt or maybe don't fully trust and believe in the light, I want to give you guys some information. You know, some of us might be listening and maybe they aren't full believers. So let me give you guys an example from something that's not biblical, but it's an example about the facts of light. Well, with speed and interaction, this is the case. Since darkness is merely the absence of light, it doesn't have a speed of its own. When light is introduced into a dark space, the darkness disappears at the speed of light. I think we can all attest to that story. The second that light comes, the darkness is no longer there. It's that quick, it's that easy, and it happens just like that. Well, what's some examples of this that we could possibly correlate with and understand? Well, we can go into this. The interaction highlights the power of light. It can illuminate and reveal what is hidden in darkness. This principle is used in various technologies today, one of which, night vision equipment and advanced telescopes. You see, these technologies in which we utilize, they need light. The power of light is drastic, especially when you talk about night vision equipment, right? Those can be utilized for life-saving situation scenarios. The power of light in those situations that you have light that comes in and they radiate, and I'm not going to get into the full exact scientific explanation of how those work, but the fact is that we need light. It reveals what is hidden in darkness, and that is critical in today's world. And so what are some of the facts about light in the Bible? Well, I wanted to read you guys this because this was something that I was going through Psalms a few months ago, and this passage really stuck out to me. You know, because I didn't quite understand being the light to the full extent yet, and I still am learning that so much as I go on and on throughout life. But when I read through Psalms 139, verses 7 through 12, I got to an understanding of just how good God is. And we see this before Jesus comes into earth and we see God in flesh, that we see this understanding of the light of God all the way back in the Old Testament. And so here's what Psalm 139 reads. I'll break it down after this. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. Just take that in and understand that. What this is saying is this is the exact explanation of why we can be the light. It's not necessarily us being the light. It's God living in and through us to shine the light of Him into this world. No matter where God is involved, there's going to be light. You can put God anywhere. He is everywhere. He's everywhere at all times. Remember, He's not everything, but He is everywhere. Right? So what exactly am I getting at right now? Well, when we recognize that God can be anywhere at all times, and no matter where that is, the darkness is going to be light. He cannot be in darkness. Darkness is not something that God can possibly be in, because darkness is only the absence of light. The second that light becomes a part of darkness, there is no darkness. It is just light now. It cannot coexist together. Where there is light, there is not darkness. And that is what this passage is saying, because it gives us examples all throughout the world. And even we go to hell, we go to these other aspects, and even in those presences, even in those places, there is going to be light. No matter where God is there. No matter where God is, there's going to be light. David Guzik says this, even in hell, God will be present because there is no place where God cannot be. Yet God's presence in hell will radiate none of His love and grace. only his righteous judgment. Therefore, what can we take from that? Even in the darkest of situations, even in the darkest of places, if God is present, his light will shine. We all have the ability to access the light of God living in and through us. And therefore, if we are the light, there will not be darkness when we are present, because that is not us, it's God working in through us. And where God is, there will not be darkness. If he is capable of, and he is, we know this throughout the word of God, to be in the presence of the enemy, to be in the darkest of evilest of worst places possible to fathom, God is there. There's nowhere you can go to escape his great power and love if you just let him live within you. And in fact, I want to add just a little bit more to the awe of the God in which we serve. Wings of the morning, when this is talked about in the scripture here that I just read, this may well refer to the spread and speed of light as it fills the morning sky from the east to the west. Light itself cannot outrun God's presence and knowledge. That's from David Guzik. Charles Spurgeon then writes this, though: light flies with inconceivable rapidity, and it flashes far afield beyond all human ken. It illuminates the great and wide sea and sets its waves gleaming afar. But its speed would utterly fail if employed in flying from the Lord. G.K. Morgan writes this: darkness is light to him and has no hiding place from him. If that doesn't bring a sense of assurance to you about the goodness of God, and start to help you to realize and recognize that when we see that there's darkness in a certain area, when we start to see that there's evil and presences that's not of God in this world, but yet we are given the access to allow the love of God, the light of God, to shine in through us, and we know that the light of God and where God is, there cannot be darkness. And you know also, if you don't want to believe from a spiritual aspect, you can look at it from a obviously standpoint, scientific explanation, that where there is light, there cannot be darkness. There is no way that God can be involved in darkness. He is in control of all things, and we see the power of light. We see it throughout the sun when the sun rises. We see it throughout his great creation of nature. The light of God is always present, and he cannot be in darkness. So then I ask, well, what are we doing today then? As believers that are followers of Jesus, what are we doing? Why are we in a position of rather than going out and being the light and getting rid of darkness? Because like I said, where we walk with God, there will be a light. Why are we then going forth and going out into the world, and we recognize and we sense and we see and we want to complain about darkness in this world, and yet we want to do nothing about that? We're too timid to let our light shine in and through the world. Well, I hinted at in the beginning, and I'll go personal reflection on this aspect, because I don't know where you are, who exactly you might be listening to this, but I know for myself, and I can give you guys a personal example here. I know I, for a long time, was timid. I was timid, I was nervous, but not even that. It was that I was nervous because I didn't have the full faith and trust in God to the full extent which I probably should, to the point where I'm now at where I'm comfortable sharing whatever, whenever, and the truth, because that is the fact of the matter. And I believe with everything I've got that God is real, that he came on earth as Jesus, and he lived a perfect life. He died on the cross, rose 3 days later. I believe that's the God I serve. And therefore, I have full confidence in that. But I still have so much more room to grow as well. And a lot of us might be thinking, well, I'm uncertain because what if it puts my job at risk? What if it puts my popularity, or I have people base opinions now upon me and don't like me any longer? The truth is, it comes down to faith, and I can assure you of that. Because if your faith is rock strong and you are living upon the firm foundation of God, I can assure you of this: you're no longer going to care what others think. As believers, we know the truth. The truth is that not everybody is going to be going to heaven when their lives are done here on earth. That's the fact of the matter. Jesus gives us the requirements for how to get to heaven, and that's what we're going to do. And if those that don't do that won't have that opportunity. And so therefore, if our mindset understands that aspect and what Jesus did for us and his love for us and his relation with us, we're no longer going to be living for the approval of what those that might not be going to heaven have to say about us. Now, there could also be judgmental Christians, of course, and that's another aspect we can get into another time. But the foundational concept is that if you're being the light, you're going to be living for the approval of one and one alone, and that's God. Any moment in which you start to strive to live in a situation and in a standpoint where you're no longer living for the approval of God, that's not an approval. That's not a lifestyle in which you should be probably living in. And by probably, I mean you should not be living in. At the end of the day, if you believe God is who he says he is in the Bible, there should be no nervous actions or timidness in regards to shining the light and being the light in this world. You know that he died for you and that you want to follow him, and therefore we are called to be the light in this world. And you have to remember how valuable that is. I just talked about a second ago. When you're going out to be the light, it's not just to go say words and babble out into the world. Your job as a Christian, as a believer, is to go put your faith and trust in God and utilize the life in which he's given you, the saved life, the redeemed, the new life he's given you, to then be able to go out and save lives. That is our responsibility as believers. You are saving people from perishing in eternal hell, from being in a position where they're going to have to suffer for all eternity. And when you have that motivation, there should be nothing that scares you of that. To save someone's life, it does not compare to that. Well, if you're in this position now, I hope that you have a little bit of motivation to a certain extent of the power of light. And so you might be asking, well, all right, okay. So how do I be a light? Maybe you don't have necessarily a show where you can just go and speak out on a YouTube channel as I'm doing now. Or maybe you don't speak at a church or you're not a pastor. Well, how do I do it if you just work in an office and do it 9 to 5? Or how do I do it if I'm just at school or whatever the case may be? Well, I'm going to give you 3 steps. Not very difficult steps, but I'm going to break these down for you. And this is how to be the light for anybody, wherever, whenever you are at. I'm going to start this off by reading from 1 John chapter 1, verses 5 through 9. It reads this: "This is the message we have heard from him and declare to you. God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. If we claim to have fellowship with him and yet walk in darkness, we lie and do not live out of the truth. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his son, purifies us from all sin. If we claim to be without sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness." So this is the New Testament version of the Psalms, essentially, that I talked about earlier. And what we see once again is that there cannot be darkness when God is present. There will be light at all times. And what he says here is, well, you can't be walking in darkness. If you choose God and you surrender your life and you believe in the death, burial, and resurrection, and you have decided to give your life to Jesus, you can't keep walking in darkness. Now, there's going to be spiritual maturity, of course. We're going to grow and we're going to learn and become more and more like Jesus. Yes, absolutely, no doubt about that. But we can't still be walking in darkness. And then it goes down to lying, which I talked about just a few weeks ago on the show. We can't be lying. Obviously, we all have mistakes, and we have to understand that we need help. That is what the Christian mission is. That's what we have to do. When we become a believer, you recognize, I can't do it alone. I need help. Jesus, help me. Father God, take these sins off me and forgive me of my wrongdoings. That is the action which we are doing. And he will do so. So the 3-step plan I discussed a couple of minutes ago is this. Step 1, you have to be a believer and leave the darkness of old lives. So when you become a believer, you believe in Jesus, obviously then you're transformed and you decide to move on from the ways of your old life, the darkness of your old ways, and you become a believer. And 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 describes this, saying, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praise of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light." We are walking out of darkness. When you become a believer in the one and only God, you are going to be able to walk out of the darkness in which God, in which you were formerly living, and you can go walk with God into the light. And the second that transformation happens, remember, when God is present, darkness is gone. It flees. And here's another aspect of how to do just that, to leave the darkness. Luke chapter 11, verse 34 and through 35 reads this: Your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eyes are healthy, your whole body also is full of light. But when they are unhealthy, your body also is full of darkness. See to it then that the light within you is not darkness. All right, so what's going on here? Well, this is in a situation in which Jesus is talking to the Pharisees. And at this point in time, the Pharisees are doubting what Jesus is doing. They're doing so obviously with their own eyes and saying, Jesus, well, you can do more things. Go do this, go do this, go do that. And Jesus is saying, no, you're doubting. I've already shown you enough anyways. And so if you don't see and you don't trust and see what your eyes are currently perceiving, then nothing's going to change your heart. You can't be changed. When your eyes are being reduced to the fact of not having faith, then you're at a position and a standpoint where you're not going to be able to see the truth and live that out. And so how do we break this down into today's concepts? Well, I was researching this to kind of get a better understanding of what Jesus was talking about here. And this was a direct discussion to the Pharisees in regards to what was going on in this mission. But on another aspect, though, you could also take away this from this. The eye is the light to the body. If we see and believe, our souls will therefore believe. So what this is saying is that if you are capable of seeing it, right, and that's essentially just saying from the standpoint of you believe it, right? You see it with your eyes, you trust it, you believe it, that then your soul can be changed. If you're blinded to the truth, you will not be able to make of good use the flashlight lighting your way. Must open eyes to the truth. If you're blinded, you can no longer see, then how would you see the light? There's no opportunity to walk in the light. You're going to be living in darkness. You must open your eyes and allow the light of God to come fill you up and believe fully. So obviously we're using a little bit of metaphors here and descriptions here, but that's essentially what God's talking about here. You've got to open your eyes and allow God to fill you up so that you may live out the life he's called you to. Step number 2 here, follow him. John chapter 8, verse 12 reads this: when Jesus spoke against the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. By following him, you will be able to lead. Following him, you will be led to know him, which can be done through reading the word, and allow that to guide you to who he's calling you to be. When Jesus says he's the light of the world, and how to follow him, a lot of people want to have this mindset and this understanding that, hey, I'm following Jesus, I love Jesus, I got this relationship, but you don't want to read the word of God. To follow him means you have to read your word so that you know who he's calling you to be. There's a lot of descriptions, a lot of help, there's a lot of advice, a lot of wisdom, there's a lot of guidance and knowledge so you should get to know him. How would you know any friend or any relationship you have without knowing who they are? It's quite frankly impossible. Well, we know a lot about God. Now, we can't fathom and understand everything, but we have a great understanding of what we can grasp as humans in the Word of God. And if we're not using that, then how are we supposed to follow him? So reading his word is a necessity. And that's what Psalm chapter 119, verse 105 reads: your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path. And we don't necessarily remember this, but this is an Old Testament passage. We've got a lot more of the Bible than what David had when he wrote this. We have so much more information that we can utilize to help guide our life post David times and post when Psalms was created and put together. Step number 3, go share the good news. Luke says in Acts chapter 13, verse 47, for this is what the Lord has commanded us. I have made you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring salvation to the ends of the earth. Remember, at this point in time, right, you have the Jews and the Gentiles. The Gentiles were not supposed to be associated and being along with the Jews. There's a lot of tension going on right there. Think of anything similar today around the world. There's a lot of tension going on with different people. But Jesus says, okay, well, the job here is to go out and talk to the Gentiles. Talk to those that are not believers. It is great to have relationships. Of course, this is where you should base your relationships around is equally yoked people and so on and so forth. And you can be the light to them. Obviously, we all need help and guidance in our walk with Jesus. But we got to go out and be the light. We have the opportunity to do just that, and that's what we're called to do. We are supposed to go out and preach the word of God to the ends of the earth. And be bold, knowing that when you have God with you, you have the light and there cannot be darkness any longer. And that's a fact from the word of God. If you believe that the word of God is true, then that is a truth that you can live in and be instilled within you. So that's it. That's the 3 steps that you need to be the light. All you have to do is be a believer, and in that leave the darkness of old lives. All you have to do is the 3 steps. 1, you have to be a believer, and leave the darkness of our old lives. 2, you have to follow him. And by following him, you have to read the word of God so you can have a better understanding of him and how to follow him. And 3, go do it. Go share the good news just as the word of God commands us to do. It's not that complicated. Everybody has the ability to do just that. You don't have to overthink it. Just go share the good news of the one in which has saved your life. For those of us that have been believers and grown up in the church, there's a song that came to mind when I was putting these notes together to make this show for you guys in this segment, and I was thinking, I'm not going to sing it because I'm not really a singer per se, but why don't we just reflect on these words? Because I think this whole concept of being the light has become so over complex than it needs to be. It's not that hard. It's not that difficult. Just be bold, be who God called you to be, and do just that. And we've made it such a complicated, complex ideology of how to be the light in this world that why don't we just bring it back to something that us all can understand as kids? So I'm going to read these lyrics to you, and hopefully this brings back a little familiarity to something that you grew up singing as a kid. So let's get right to this. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine all the time. Let it shine. All around the neighborhood, I'm going to let it shine. All around the neighborhood, I'm going to let it shine. All around the neighborhood. I'm going to let it shine all the time. Let it shine. Hide it under a bushel? No, I'm going to let it shine. Hide it under a bushel? No, I'm going to let it shine. Hide under a bushel? No, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine all the time. Let it shine. Don't let Satan blow it out. I'm going to let it shine. Don't let Satan blow it out. I'm going to let it shine. Don't let Satan blow it out. I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine all the time. Let it shine. It's that simple, folks. We overcomplex what it's like to be the light in this world today. We overthink it. We make it such a complex idea and concept for us that it doesn't have to be that complex. All you got to do is let the light shine. All we have to do is go out and share the testimony of the God that saved your life. And we're doing that not the way that we're called to do it. We got to do it out of love. We got to just be the light and follow the word of God. There's a 3 simple step plan I just told you guys a little bit ago. And I think a lot of us, we've been hiding our light. We've been hiding who we are. We've been hiding our love for Jesus and the one that saved our life. We've been hiding, letting it get blown out. We've been hiding under the bush. We've been hiding it. And ultimately what it comes down to is we've allowed the enemy to blow it out. We've allowed ourselves as Christians to get into a position where we're too tentative. We're too nervous to share the light. Why? Why be so nervous to share the light of God, the one that saved your life? Anyone that saved your life, I'm quite sure you would be letting a lot of people know about that. But yet we've gotten ourselves into a position where we don't want to be the light any longer. We're too nervous. We're tentative. We're scared. We don't know if that's our calling, and so on and so forth. We think we need to be so equipped and we have to have all this wisdom, knowledge, and so on and so forth. Just got to be the light, folks. It's not that hard. We got to stop falling for these lies of the enemy that lead us to a position where we want to get to a situation where we're going to allow the enemy to blow that light out. We need to go forth and be the light. Because once you've discovered the good news, why would you hide it? Matthew chapter 5, verse 14 to 16 says this: You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Matthew chapter 5, verse 14 through 16. If you are the light, it will not be hidden. The light is God living in and through you. And if that is the case, there will not be darkness around you. You can't hide it. People won't be able to dim it out. God has ultimate control, and you're never going to want to pass up on that opportunity. You're not going to want to hide that light, but rather you should go forth and be bold and shine that light before others. Let them see the way that you glorify God. Let them see the peace in which you live. Let them see the way that they can glorify the Father in heaven. That's the type of life in which you should be wanting to live. And as believers, this is for us. I don't think we're doing the best job as a church at whole. We're not doing the best job of that. We've allowed our lights to be dimmed, blown out, and whatnot. The bolder we can get, and the more we reflect Jesus and the Word of God and how it calls us to be, the bigger impact and more lives that we can go and save and change. So let that resonate with you guys. Think about that and come to an understanding of just how good God is for us and how we need to go forth and be the light and stop letting it get blown out, but rather be motivated to be the light and let the kingdom of God continue to grow. So I appreciate each and every single one of you guys for listening to this segment. I'll be back in a few short minutes to get into the next segment of this show. Appreciate you guys all for tuning in once again, and God bless you guys. If you were to have the ball in your hands the whole game, you're the guy for a whole season, 82-game season, how much do you think you're averaging?
Ball in my hand, 25, no doubt. Easy. 25, no doubt, easy. And that's just me knowing my ability and knowing what I can bring every night. Because I feel like, because I see like the little stats on Twitter, some games, they be like, when Canton plays this certain amount of minutes, he averages 30, or he plays, this amount of games with this amount of minutes, he averages 25. So I feel like if I have the ability to play with the ball in my hand, make the decisions, all that stuff, I feel like I can average 25 points a game easy, no doubt.
Staying consistent, I move with the clock. I'm in the zone, I'm not casting a stone. I'm finna stand on a rock, firm foundation. I got that dog in me, like 101 Dalmatian. I got girl with me, so I know that I'm still finna make it. I'm still finna take it. I hopped in the ring and I'm still going crazy. I cut off this thing like I just got a taper. I walk in the storm and then God gave me favor. I'm still going forward. I just had to lock in the Lord. I knew that I'm finna make it. Though in my old self, he got deported. Shout out to the king and I'm finna take it.
Welcome back, everyone, to the SchuZ Show. I'm your host, Zach SchuZ Shoemaker, and I appreciate everyone for tuning in once again. It is now past midnight here in Arizona, and I believe it's 3 a.m. Eastern time. That being said, though, it's time to get right into Hardwood realities, where the raw authenticity of the hardwood echoes truth. All right, so we got a few different basketball topics to get into today. The first one I want to talk about is, I'm not sure how many people have come across and seen this picture yet, but we have seen a massive transformation now going on with Zion Williamson. And if anybody has seen that picture, it is quite obvious that he's been in the gym working. Now, I don't know exactly what all has been going down to cut the weight, but he had his most healthy season in a very long time last year. Unfortunately, he got hurt heading into the playing game, and that was unfortunate. But, we look at this Pelicans team, and they're looking mighty fine right now, to be quite frankly honest with you guys. And I'm a big fan of what this Pelicans team is starting to look like and grow into. So if Zion Williamson is in great shape, and it appears that he's been working to get himself into elite shape right now, that we could be seeing a very special Zion Williamson this season, which excites me because this West is a gnarly division right now. It's got a gnarly conference, top to bottom. It is stacked, and it's going to be a war in there. but they got the talent. As of now, the center spot, is a little bit shaky. We don't know who's going to be starting. Daniel Tice or, Yves Misi could be possibly starting there, the rookie they drafted in the first round. That's a little bit of a hole. But having CJ McCollum, Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, and DeJounte Murray on your team, that's a nice 4 guys right there. On top of that, you have a guy in Trey Murphy. I like his game a lot. You got Jose Alvarado and Herb Jones. This team has got guys, and this is the team that should be very exciting to watch. And ultimately, all helms on the top guy, and that's Zion. If Zion is healthy this season, the ceiling is quite high for the Pelicans. I'm not going to necessarily put them at, they could win it all this year, but, they're certainly going to be able to make a lot of noise this season if the New Orleans Pelicans are capable of being healthy this season. So Zion Williamson's body transformation, so many people have been doubting Zion for a long time now. And we've gotten to a place now where, a lot of people said, is he really willing to put that work in? Is he really willing to be the guy that he potentially could be? And if it appears, and this is true, these pictures are true, that we could be having a complete transformation in Zion where we're looking at him now becoming the guy who we've all once hoped he would become in that high-level elite superstar athlete that's 100% healthy and works hard to become that guy. So that's a lot of high expectations now that are being kind of given onto this Pelicans team, because if Zion's healthy and he's looking the way he is, and this is the best shape it appears in his of him in his career, then this Pelicans team ceiling jumps a lot, and this is a team that could make a lot of noise this season. Other big news, Jeff Bezos is reportedly interested in buying the Celtics per Bill Simmons. He says this, in the last few days has been some, I think, legitimate buzz about Jeff Bezos buying the Celtics, and I think it's real. I think he's going to be one of the suitors. Now, that's interesting. And I want to give you guys a little breakdown into why I think this, because, well, we know Jeff Bezos has been very interested in buying a professional sports team, at least one, for quite a few years now. He's been interested in it. This would be a perfect situation for both him and the Boston Celtics. And let me explain why. Well, we know, and we've had a lot of discussion about the drastic changes now in the cap. I'm not going to give the full-on rules and details of that all right now, but essentially it's become a lot more constricted to only having 2 superstars per se, especially if you build them up, because there's going to be such a large tax penalty and so on and so forth for them. Well, if Jeff Bezos is buying this just to have fun and build the best possible team he can, then this is a team that we look at, they can sustain this for a long time. You have your foundational core duo right there in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Those 2 guys aren't going anywhere, and for at least the next 5 years, they're going to be contenders. All the way up to possibly 10 even. I don't know exactly how long it's going to last, but those 2 guys are going to be together for quite some time. But then you got guys like Drew Holiday, you got guys like Al Horford and company that, they probably won't be lasting for the entirety of that run. So they need to have opportunities to add on to that team and still be great. And they have the luxury of doing so because they have those 2 guys core built upon in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. So the excitement here is that if Jeff Bezos buys them, we know that he's one of the wealthiest men in all the world. There's not a lot of stuff he won't be able to buy or taxes he won't be able to pay. And so if he buys this team and this franchise, the Boston Celtics have a legitimate chance now at winning many championships over the next 10 years. They will be able to sustain success with Jeff Bezos at the helm and ownership. And from his aspect, well, you get a very, very valuable franchise. I'm sure he's one of the greatest businessmen of all time. He's going to be able to make the right moves for the Celtics in that regard. But on top of that, they could build this brand and really continue to elevate this over the next 10 or so years to build a potential dynasty run. I don't know. That could obviously be the case. But he could really add on value to this Boston Celtics team more so than it already is one of the top valued franchises in the world. So that's something to start to keep an eye on. And I think if Jeff Bezos is interested and does decide to pursue him by the Boston Celtics, that'll make massive waves within the basketball world, because there's not a lot of guys that's going to be able to compete financially with Jeff Bezos. The last subject I want to get into in hardwood realities is this. Free agent forward Gershon Yabusele, he's agreed to a 1-year, $2.1 million deal to be with the Philadelphia 76ers. You might ask, well, why does this interest me? Well, first of all, anybody that watched the Olympics knows how great of a performance he put on. And he already was a solid rotational-ish guy, in the NBA a few years ago, but he looks drastically better. And if he plays anything to the extent in which he played in the Olympics, then the 76ers got a massive steal here. And I say this because let's go back 1 year ago. I made a video, and a lot of people at the time weren't not big fans of what I said. And I said that the Kelly Oubre signing was going to be huge for the 76ers, and it paid dividend. And I think that was one of the greatest value contracts, was the best value contract in the NBA last year. I'm not saying Yabusele is going to be Kelly Oubre. However, what I'm saying is that Daryl Morey has put together quite a few of these good moves that maybe not a lot of people expected, but yet come to fruition, and they are big-time, massive moves for the team in the future. And so you had Yabusele on this team, and on a team that already has had, I think, the best offseason in the NBA. I absolutely love what the 76ers have done, and I've said that a few times, but what I haven't done is actually breaking down this team for you guys. And so I'm going to give you guys a little preview of this Philadelphia 76ers team now that Yabusele has been added onto the roster, because I'm very high on this roster. First and foremost, before I go any further, I want to make sure I say this. The team I'm about to break down is a team that has a legitimate chance to win an NBA championship this year. And not only do I think they have a chance, I think that it, quite frankly, would be disappointing if they don't win an NBA championship this year. I think that the only thing really hindering this team from being able to make that jump and become an NBA roster is health. It's been technical difficulty right there, but we should be back and rolling and all good. So I'm gonna restart that segment for you guys so that we can get that more complete there for everybody tuning in. So that final concept and discussion I want to get into today is about from Hardwood Realities is this Philadelphia 76ers team. Because I look at this roster and first of all, the news that came out was that for Gershon Yabusele, he's agreed to a 1-year, $2.1 million deal with the Philadelphia 76ers. And I think that's a massive move for them. I alluded to it last year. There was a certain move that was late into the offseason, right before training camp and all got going. And I was very high on it. A lot of people thought I was a little crazy for saying that. But I love the addition of Kelly Oubre. I thought that was going to be the best value contract in the NBA last season. And I stand by that. I think a lot of people would agree with me that that was a bargain deal for the Sixers. Daryl Morey has a history of doing these type of moves. And I don't want to say Yabusele is going to be the same as Kelly Oubre was. But what I do want to say is I think he can be a very big contribution to this roster and be a legitimate rotational guy for the Philadelphia 76ers this year. So he's added on to this roster, and I'm very excited about this addition because not only is it just a Yabusele addition now, but this adds on to what I see and believe to be an incredible offseason for Sixers. I've already ranked them the best offseason in the NBA this year. I think they've nailed the offseason from top to bottom. And I think that this team and what Daryl Morey has built has now positioned themselves to be in a situation where they're competing for an NBA championship this year. And I'm actually going to go as far as to say this. I think that if they don't win an NBA championship this year, I honestly would think it would be a disappointment. Now, I will put one big asterisk mark right here next to this concept because they have to be healthy. And, that's what it comes down to because the Sixers have had chances to advance and go deep into the playoffs with Joel Embiid, but his health has not been there. If Embiid's not healthy, if he's banged up, this take obviously goes down the drain because they're not going to be there without a healthy Joel Embiid. And now you've added in Paul George, who also does not have the best health history overall. And so they've got to be healthy. Let's say they are healthy, and what I see right now is a healthy roster. The roster's been compiled for this year's team. I think that this is a legitimate team to possibly win the NBA championship this season. They're that good. I absolutely love what they built here. And so I want to break this roster down for you. So I'm going to kind of give you guys a little bit of a preview of this 76ers team because I am very high on this team. Like I said, I think this is a team that has a legitimate chance at winning an NBA championship this season, to the extent where I might even say that I think it would be a disappointment if they don't win the NBA championship. And so when I break down this roster, here's what I'm looking at currently. I'm looking at the starting point guard for this roster being a guy who had a breakout season last year, is a legitimate all-star, and I think even has been a little bit underrated now to a certain extent. I think he's an incredible playmaker, and I'm talking about Tyrese Maxey here, who is one of the top guards in the country, in the entire world. And I think that him taking another year of development and another jump and being around the likes of a Paul George and company and also being mentored by a guy like Kyle Lowry more is going to allow him to have an even bigger year this season. You then have a guy, and this is a projected starting five, but I'm assuming Oubre will be starting this year. However, there's certainly guys on the bench you could flip-flop him with. You get a guy who is what we saw last year, can fit into any rotation, will take on whatever role you want to give him, can score, is a good player, works hard on defense. He's a good player. And then you have at small forward, the premier 3-and-D player in the NBA today, and that is Paul George. You have a legitimate all-star. And essentially, as I said, what this team has done has pretty much taken last year's roster and flip-flopped Tobias Harris with Paul George. That difference right there is huge. That is you can't even give it a proper wording for how drastic of an upgrade that is right there. Tobias Harris, not trying to diss him or anything right now. He's a good player, obviously has a good career, but we're talking about a guy that when he's playing is a premier guy in the NBA. That's Paul George for you. And so you're adding him into this roster, a massive upgrade, a guy that plays elite defense, is a 3-and-D player, can go create on his own, get buckets, take a lot of pressure off of both Maxey and Joel Embiid while playing at high-level defense. So I've loved Paul George's addition since the day they got the deal done. Then you add in Caleb Martin. Underrated pickup there. A lot of people forget about him. I absolutely love what Caleb Martin brings to the team. I think he's undervalued. I think a lot of people forget how good he was for Miami a couple years ago. And I think him bringing himself into this team where he's likely going to be a starting power forward, in my opinion from right now, is that he's a guy that leaves it all out there, hustles on defense, is a great guy that just fills a roster, right? You don't need all guys that's going to go create shots and get buckets and be superstars. You need guys to play roles, and they got one in Caleb Martin. Then you have Joel Embiid, a guy that is one of the premier guys in the NBA, a legitimate MVP candidate. We know who he is. We know that when healthy, the 76ers can have with certain confidence that they have the best player in the NBA. Now, obviously, others will debate that, and if he's 1, 2, 3, whatever the case may be. But what I'm saying is that if you're the 76ers, there's no reason you don't walk out as a team believing you have the best player. We know how good Joel Embiid is, and whether you want to rank him 1 or you want to rank him 4 or 5, whatever the case may be, we know that Joel Embiid is a legitimate superstar that you can build around when healthy. Obviously, when healthy once again. And so that's a starting five that I'm very high on. Like I said, you could flip-flop a couple of these guys. But now you look at this bench. And you get a bench that we're starting off this time around looking at the big men. Well, you swing it over to Andre Drummond and Adembona, who obviously is a rookie that I think could be a guy that will play a lot of time and a lot of minutes in the G League. But I think that when you get him an opportunity later in the season, he hustles, he plays great defense. You can get him a few minutes, especially if you need to shut down Embiid for a little bit of time. But the main backup there is Andre Drummond. You get him back in Philadelphia. I like that. He's a guy that can rebound. He plays hard. We know he can fill the stat sheets when he's playing a lot. And, obviously you don't want him being your starting center throughout the entire season. But what you're comfortable with is letting him go spill some minutes for Joel Embiid. If Embiid needs to hit a game or two, go let him start the game. I don't think you have any issues with that, especially when you have guys like Paul George and Tyrese Maxey and other guys like Kelly Oubre that can score at will. So I think hitting him back to Philadelphia was huge. And just talking about Yabusele, I think at the bare minimum, you're talking about a guy that already was a rotational guy to a certain extent with the Celtics just a couple years ago. And now he's obviously a much better player. He looks a lot better. He's playing a lot more confident, and he's much more mature as a player. Am I expecting him to go out there and dominate? No. But can he be a guy in this playoff rotation possibly? Absolutely. I like what he brings to the team. We just saw what he did in Paris. He obviously can play with the best of the best. Throwing him in there to possibly maybe even be the starting power forward. I don't know. I have Caleb Martin at this point in time, but both those guys could be interchangeable. I love what Yabusele brings to this team. You then look at the forwards and wing guys. You have KJ Martin, who we didn't see a lot of last year. This could be the one spot I'd say you could see an upgrade at. However, personally, they do have a guy that I think if you bring him and let him run the small forward more so and kind of get him adjust to that role is Ricky Council. I think he's a guy that we saw last year. I was shocked just to begin with. Let me just say this. I was shocked when he went undrafted. And anybody can go see the comments I've left and statements I made about that. Shocked that he went undrafted last year. No reason that he went undrafted. However, the story of the NBA and life goes, you got to go and find the best opportunity. I think he found just that because he's thriving now. He's on a standard contract. Good guy. And I think that he's going to be the guy that emerges as a legitimate rotational guy for this team now. He's the guy that has explosiveness, has energy, a high character guy, plays his role, can play defense at a high level. He's young. He's athletic as all get out. And so I think you add him into this roster, he's going to be a guy that will be in the rotation this year. He's going to have a great season, and he's going to be a critical component to the 76ers roster. You also have KJ Martin. Like I said, didn't play a lot, but I do think Ricky Council will be that guy that officials in that rotation. KJ will be more so of a depth piece for them, but still both guys can be fine and can easily fit in that rotation and be good depth pieces on that roster. You go to the shooting guard spot and you bring in Eric Gordon, who had a solid year last year for the Phoenix Suns. Phoenix it didn't all work together, it didn't all come together. It felt stagnant, felt a little bit weird, and at times they were asking Eric Gordon to be a guy that had to be point guard in a sense because they didn't have a point guard last year. And he's capable of that to a certain extent, but he's been a shooting guard his whole career. That's what he is. He's a good shooting guard. And you get him back in that role because you put him in that second unit with the point guards I'm going to discuss in a second, guys that can set the table for him and get him going. So I think he's in a great situation now. He's not going to be required to start most likely. He could potentially if you want to flip-flop Oubre and him, but I like Eric Gordon was a big-time pickup. Then you have Jared McCain. He's a rookie. Obviously, on a championship team like this level roster he might not get a lot of minutes. However, we did see him play in the Summer League, and we see what he's capable of. Could he be a guy that develops into that by the second half of the season? Sure, absolutely. He can shoot the ball. We know that. That's always valuable. And so I think he's a guy that, especially being mentored by Eric Gordon, is a little bit of an underrated component there. Because I don't think a lot of people recognize, the impact a veteran can have. But if Jared McCain essentially takes a role this season where he will play sometimes, obviously it's a long NBA season, but generally speaking, it's going to be a lot of G League. It's going to be a lot of watching the team play. But you get to spend the whole year being around a lot of these guys, but specifically Eric Gordon, I think that's going to be huge for him because he's going to learn from a true pro, a great veteran, and then be able to take over that role in his sophomore season in the NBA. But still, both guys, I like that. And then you have the point guard depth that I absolutely love. Kyle Lowry returns. He's staying home. You don't get a much better veteran than that. You're talking about a guy that has won a championship. You're talking about a guy that's had so many playoff experiences and games. He's been a veteran, been in the league for a long time. He's a guy that's still willing to sacrifice his body for charges. He's a guy that's one of the all-time great charge takers in NBA history. He is a true leader, a true pro. When things get a little shaky in the locker room, he's a guy you can call on. He's going to help sort things out. He's just a good guy to have on that roster. He's still a very valuable player as well. And you get him off your bench, love it. And then you even add the cherry on top here, and you add Reggie Jackson into the mix, who was a guy that had just average double-digit points in Denver last season, who stepped up when he needed to step up. And you're saying Reggie Jackson might not even be a guy that's going to be in the rotation always. I have Maxey and then Lowry at 1-2. There might be games where he doesn't play. But that's how deep of a roster this is. This was a masterclass offseason for Daryl Morey. And as I said, this take come back and people say, oh, look, the 76ers didn't even do anything in the postseason again. Well, I don't believe that's going to be the case if they're healthy. And I understand it's a massive if. We have not seen Embiid healthy yet, but this is the best 76ers team that's been built around Joel Embiid to this point. They have depth, they have young guys, they have veterans, they have experience, they have talent. And this legitimately is a team that, if healthy, can win the NBA championship this year. And I quite frankly think that's a very high likely chance that occurs. This is a roster that I'm extremely high on. They have depth, and also you have to talk about coaching. Nick Nurse, one heck of a coach, one of the top coaches in the NBA, extremely underrated, and he's going to be running the show here. So I do have very high expectations and high hopes for what this Philadelphia 76ers team will be capable of accomplishing this year. That's what I've got for you guys today on Hardwood Realities, and I'll get back to you guys in a little bit as I get into the final topic for today's show, which will be combat currents. I appreciate everybody for tuning in once again, and I'll see you guys in a few short minutes. God bless you guys. Talk to you guys in a little bit. From the moment I was born, a ball was in my hands and a deep passion for sports was ignited. My dream was to play the game for as long as possible, but God had other plans. After battling with severe illnesses caused by black mold poisoning for nearly 4 years, I made the difficult decision to let go of my on-court dreams heading into my junior year of high school. However, I was determined to have one last victorious moment as an athlete, and that was achieved on February 9th, 2019, when I ran a marathon at the age of 16. That night, as I took a recovering Epsom salt bath, I felt God place on my heart the idea to start a podcast. Although I didn't know where to begin, the first episode of SchuZ Views dropped on March 11th, 2019. Over the next 1,183 days, more than 600,000 people tuned into 1,056 interviews. Then, on June 6, 2022, my final interview for over a year was released featuring Jameer Young. I never once thought that I'd be off the air for over a year. But the truth is, there was something missing in me. At first, I thought creating a website would help fill that void, so I went and put together SchuZ.net, but nothing changed. Throughout the next month, I continued searching for answers, and eventually, God worked in the only way that would have gotten my attention at that point in time. Through something work-related. By the end of July 2022, my parents blessed me with the opportunity to build a studio. However, before breaking ground, the real change began. On August 3rd, 2022, my life changed forever. Once again, I happened to be taking a bath late into the night, and suddenly, an indescribable feeling came upon me. It was a profound urge to open up my Bible and read. I turned to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and since that night, not a single day has passed without me spending time in the Word. You see, what was missing all along was Jesus. On August 6th, my dad and I began to lay the foundation for the next chapter of my career. Simultaneously, the foundation of who I was created to be was also being laid. Over the years, I had lost sight of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I knew of God, but I didn't know Him, and I certainly was not following or living like Him. But day by day, the new me began to take shape. My former self's sole priority faded away, and I began to live out the acronym I often talked about, FJTFOE. It stands for First Jesus, then Family Over Everything. God became my everything, and He transformed me entirely. He helped me rediscover my love for family, running, lifting, playing basketball, giving back, the church, and most importantly, Him. This journey began with a craving to nourish my old identity, but God's hand was always in control, rapidly shaping my new identity. As God transformed me, He also grew my relationship with every member of my family. Together they stood by me and contributed to the person I am today. Through it all, Ephesians chapter 3 verse 20 manifested its truth in my life. The blessings I received far exceeded anything I could have imagined. The truth is that God's hand has always been there, but now I'm committed to following His path. Although I may look different, and my heart has undergone a profound change, I am truly blessed to announce the beginning of a new chapter. Starting July 24th, I will be launching my new show, the SchuZ Show, which will air on my YouTube channel every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I can't wait for you guys to join me in this next chapter. I'll see you guys soon, and may God bless you all. There is a funny aspect about you, and that's the fact that I don't think you necessarily even tried to, but there's been countless times in your brief NBA career already that you've made it viral. You've made memes of yourself, whatever it might be. One of which was in the midst of that 40-point streak. You obviously broke LeBron's record, and you made your comment saying about, well, I'm not really a LeBron guy, I'm a Kobe guy. And I don't think you even intended that to go viral. Now you have that.
Nah, not at all.
There's your Steve Nash moment during the Summer League. We know that aspect. I think that was after the second year. You had a fun, obviously, at one point. You have your branding that you've now done. When you look at all these, like, do you ever intend to expect something to go viral or be funny, or does you just end up happening, and then by the time you get back on your phone, you're like, oh, this already just went down, dang.
Bro, that's crazy. No, not at all. No, because even with my brand, like when a random person asks me, because random people always see like, oh, he's so serious, and I'm just like, bro. And then I say it all the time. Like I say it no matter what. And I said it at one time and it blew up. And I was just like, I mean, I said it. I've been saying it every time. Like somebody asked me that. So then, that blew up. And then the Kobe thing, I was just being honest. I mean, it's no disrespect to LeBron. Obviously, I love looking at LeBron playing stuff like that. He's done a lot for the game and stuff. But it's just me being a fan of basketball. Me growing up with Kobe. Just my love for Kobe is like unmatched. So really that part. So really everything I say, I'm just like. I mean, I'm not really intending to go viral. I'm just speaking what's on my mind at that point. So, if it goes viral, it goes viral.
Which one of the things that's happened so far, maybe even one that I've not listed yet, was the most surprising to you? Like by the time you got on your phone, maybe even someone else came and told you about it, where you're like, dang, that really went viral?
The branding. My brand, honestly. I was never expecting that to go viral. Because I always said it. I always said the same thing. No matter what somebody asked me that, I always said it. And that went viral before. And then that one particular day, I woke up, and then the very next day or a few hours later, I don't really remember because we was playing Philly when I said it. We was playing Philly, and then when I said it, it took off, and I was like, oh man, I was not expecting that at all.
if you were to have the ball in your hands the whole game.
Staying consistent, I move with the clock. I'm in the zone. I'm not casting a stone. I'm finna stand on a rock. Firm foundation. I got that dog in me, like 101 Dalmatian. I got girl with me, so I know that I'm still finna make it. I'm still finna take it. I hopped in the ring and I'm still going crazy. I cut off this sin like I just got a taper. I walk in the storm and then God gave me favor. I'm still going forward. I just had to lock in the Lord. I knew that I'm finna make it. Doing my old self, he got deported. Shout out to the king and I'm finna take it.
Welcome back, everyone, to the SchuZ Show, late night, or maybe even early morning edition. I got a lot to get into on today's subject, and today's topic for the segment will be combat currents, in which I will always be unmasking combat currents of today's fight world. So first and foremost, we got a lot to recap. I want to start the show off by doing the recap, and then we'll get into some news, headlines, and so on and so forth. Lots of stuff to get into today. Exciting news in the fight world recently. So first of all, I have to recap UFC 305, Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya. That was the main event. We know how that went down. I'll break that down in a second. But I want to make sure I start off, though, and we kind of work our way up to the main event. Or, actually, let's just stick right with this and kind of go down in order from 1 to 3, which will be the 3 fights I'm going to mainly cover in this segment. So, to start off, the very first thing I want to get into actually will be the main event, which was Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya. So this was an intense middleweight fight, and obviously Dricus came out with the victory over Izzy. It was a back and forth event. The funny thing that I think a lot of us recognize is that Dricus is the real deal. He is legit. There's a match I want to talk about here in a second, but when we go into this fight, this was Izzy's in a short comeback, and a lot of people, including myself, was already a little bit skeptical of him getting the rematch or a championship fight right away. That's what happened to occur, though, and he's earned it overall because of his career or whatnot. But I thought the rematch with Strickland should have happened instead of this one. But this is what went down. And the funny thing we learned about Dricus, though, is when we talk about the way he fights, it's such a unique style. He doesn't dominate in any way, shape, or form one specific skill. It's a combination. And on top of that, I think we all learned that he gasses out, or at least it appears he gasses out very, very quickly. But he fights the same way regardless of when that time occurs. It's this consistent way that he fights. It's a very challenging for him, but we were looking at this fight, and they were going back and forth, but there was a certain point when, it felt like Izzy maybe was getting something going. But Dricus decides to come out really quickly, and he hits Izzy with a couple shots, and Izzy decides he wants to, fight right then. He does the little knockoff Max Holloway in a sense, and in that moment, then just a few moments later, he is submitted by rear naked chokehold. So, it was a very interesting fight. Dricus officially, he cemented himself, though, as that guy. He is a legitimate star, and he deserves to be considered in that same category as one of the elites now. And, that was obviously an interesting fight there. But here's what I will say. What was intriguing to me was, a lot of people had rumors and speculations out there that, maybe this was a chance that following the fight that Izzy would have retired, especially if he would have won. And yet Izzy came back and said, he's not done yet. And that leads me to wonder, though, what is next for Izzy? He's the first ballot Hall of Famer. He's one of the biggest fan favorite fighters of all time. He has an incredible resume. What else is there for him to do? Because he said we're not going to see him very soon. Might not be 3 months or so, but what are we waiting for? It's regardless of what happens, it's not going to be or shouldn't be for a championship fight. So he's going to have to work his way up to some extent. And you've really got a lot of guys already in line. The guy I'm going to talk about in a second now, Sean Strickland's up next. And after that, the winner of the Robert Whittaker Khamzat fight, should probably be the guy right after that to fight the winner of Strickland and du Plessis. So we've got a lot of guys moving in pieces here. I'm not sure who you really would even go after and fight. That would make sense, right? Because you're not just going to give Izzy a nobody per se to fight. So that's where things get really interesting for him. If he decides to walk away, I think a lot of people would understand that, and it would make sense to a certain extent. But if he wants to continue fighting, it'd be great. I just hope that he preserves himself and he doesn't turn into something where he takes unnecessary hits and stuff very similar to what we're seeing in Tony Ferguson now. And so that's something I would be interesting. Now, after Izzy, though, I want to, of course, talk about the champion. Dricus du Plessis has now got the opportunity to do a couple of different things. We've heard throughout the week, and I addressed this on the Thursday show, that the plan in place was for him to do the rematch against John Strickland. Or originally it was Dana White said, the winner of that fight was going to fight Strickland. Now that we know the winner, obviously I'm putting those two pieces together, which that's the thing that should happen. I do believe that when you go back and rewatch that fight, that Strickland won that fight. Therefore, we'd be in a much different situation in terms of everything going on, which just happened this past weekend or even early in the year and so on and so forth regarding this fight. And so I personally do hope that we see Strickland and Duplessis. However, there was an interesting thing that came from that night that made me think a little bit. We saw Alex Pereira announce or I should say hint at a possible going back down to the middleweight division and fighting Dricus now and getting that belt back. Now, that would be something that would be very interesting to watch. I, of course, will say that I have to admit Pereira would win that fight. However, it would be intriguing to watch, to say the least. What I hope would happen, though, is this. Because we have something that I'm going to talk about also in a second, that Pereira is now booked, we know his next fight. Now, they could change that, of course, whatever. But most likely, we do know his next fight. I would like to see Strickland fight Dricus, by the end of the year. We're currently sitting in August, end of August per se. Is that something we could get on the December card? Is that something or do we have to wait for the very first, UFC event in January or whatever the case may be? Early next year, I should say 2025. But what I would like to say would be, hopefully Dricus can get together and he's not too badly injured. We can see him back in this year, get that fight up and over with. And from that standpoint, then we can address who else is going to go from there. Because if Strickland beats Dricus, then obviously it's going to be an opportunity where, the Pereira fight doesn't make any sense any longer because we already know what Pereira over Strickland looks like. Not very pretty. So it's going to be an interesting, lots of moving pieces here, but I do hope we stick to the plan that was put in place where we see Strickland fighting Dricus Duplessis, by the end of this year, preferably would be my situation, my preference here. And in that rematch, I would say I think Strickland wins. I think that his style is tough to fight. Obviously, Dricus did come out, according to the judges, in the last one. If that occurs again, then so be it. However, I just don't see a situation in which, I don't think Dricus is better than Sean Strickland, in all honesty. Is he more entertaining? Maybe you could say that. But I think Strickland gets the win and will defeat Dricus Duplessis in the rematch. Next up on that was the co-main event. Kai Kara-France for Steve Erceg. In the flyweight division, this was a fight that went down, and it didn't last very long. It was at round one, and we see the powerful punch by Kai Kara-France. And he certainly made a statement. It stinks for Steve Erceg. I know I respect the guy. He's a good fighter. He's a good guy. Was not his night. It was a knockout hit. And, there was no way he's going to recover from that hit. But for Kai Kara-France, he's officially submitted himself and put himself in prime position now. He's amongst the top guys now in the flyweight division. Is it a title fight next? Is it an eliminator fight? Whatever the case may be. He's certainly up in that group now, and he made a big statement that night. Number 3 fight I've got to get into, and I was going to start off and go up from 3-1. However, I figured why not start with the fight of the night. Dan Hooker put on an absolute clinic. Now, that was an entertaining fight, I should say. It wasn't necessarily a clinic in terms of skill, more so meant that in the aspect of entertainment. That was a fight against Gamrot, which I don't think a lot of people expected from Hooker completely. I say that because there was so much hype building up for so many years of Dan Hooker, and then he had the in a sense you could say career come apart and lost a few losses. But now he's in a position where Dan Hooker has reinvented himself to a certain extent, got over the hump of where he was for a long time, and has now come back and has had a winning streak. He's won 3 in a row. He's now moved to number 5 in the lightweight rankings. He's in prime position to have a big move. And that's really what I want to get into today with him, because that was a fight that went the distance. It had a split decision, but it's hard not to say that was obviously rightfully so the fight of the night. It was an entertaining fight, a good fight, and a lot of people earned a lot of great respect for Dan Hooker that night, as he should have. So he climbed his rankings up now, and you put him in position now where what's next? You know that you have a star in him. I know he's a beloved fighter. And so for Dana White, you have a chance to make a big fight. And what we heard rumors of now, and I can't say this was official, I know this is what we said, Hunter Campbell, he was the one that went and talked supposedly and suggested this idea, is that Dan Hooker, Charles Oliveira. That's a fight that I think would be box office. A lot of people might look at that and it would be interesting. Dan Hooker just works his way back up, but I think we would all be for that. That would be an incredible fight to watch. would be a box office type fight to watch because both guys obviously have obviously Oliveira, I'm not going to compare Hooker to his fan base and the love that people have for Charles, but overall, what Dan Hooker did the other night earned him a ton of respect. People love him, and that would be an entertaining fight to say the least. So that's your breakdown of UFC 305. And now we're in a position where we're going to start getting ready for UFC 306 at the Sphere. We all know how much Dana White has hyped this up. We're a few weeks out now to be able to see if this really will go down as one of, if not the greatest combat event ever put together, as Dana White likes to say. But I want to break down now what we have heard from some other components of the UFC. And I want to go down the rankings. They just came out now, and I'm going to put this up on the screen for you guys to see the new updated top 15. I also want to shout out Championships Rounds for the graphic in which I'm utilizing. They obviously were the ones that made this, so I want to put this up here on the screen and give you guys the top 15 guys in the UFC pound-for-pound rankings. At number 15, Izzy Adesanya. He follows to 15. Charles Oliveira. Then you have Sean Strickland. You have Pantoja. You have Max Holloway. Tom Aspinall. Volkanovski. Leon Edwards is at number 8. Sean O'Malley. Duplessis. Muhammad. Tupora. Jones, Pereira, and Islam is rounding out at number 1. So we had quite a bit of movement after this past weekend. Not a ton overall. Obviously, Duplessis was the biggest jump, moving up 5 spots to number 6. But, we look at this group, and obviously I just said a couple minutes ago, we look at what we have right there. Duplessis, Sean Strickland, that's the fight that needs to happen next. I think we all want to see that, and that would be incredible to watch. But that is your new updated top 15 pound-for-pound rankings for the UFC as we stand at the moment. So I also now want to transition now into, that's overall what we're going to talk about for UFC. There's a couple of things I'm going to talk about when we get to the news section, but I do want to break down another component to what we've been looking at now with the boxing situation from this past weekend. I said before, it was not going to be the biggest boxing weekend we've ever seen before. It was a good boxing weekend, to say the least, but it wasn't the biggest event ever. But I do want to get into it, so it won't be too long here. And I want to break down the Christian Mbilli fight. There's actually 2 guys I'm going to discuss from this weekend. The first one will be Christian Mbilli. And I want to say that because I want to say the biggest statement made for the last, in which I want to give a large talk about. So Christian Mbilli goes in, and he fights Sergey Derevyanchenko. And let me just say this. I tweeted about this fight. Brutal, brutal fight. This was a fight that, as watching fighters, you don't want them to ever throw in the towel. At the same time, there's a time where your corner probably needs to step up, and I felt this was the fight that should have occurred. However, for Derevyanchenko, he's had such an incredible career, a long career. This was probably going to be his last chance at ever getting to a championship. This was a critical fight for him. I can see why he wanted to go out on a shield, but this was a tough fight. This was brutal. There's some fights that you watch that just, it's not good. And that's what we had here. It went the distance, which was shocking to watch, to say the least, because this was a brutal, brutal, brutal fight. But what I will say is that he had a warrior mindset in there, to say the least. There's no other way to put it. You're talking about a guy who, I don't believe it's been confirmed to this point yet, but I think it's pretty obvious. He tore his bicep early in the fight. I believe it was the end of round 3 or 4. Then going forward, he fights with literally one hand. He does try utilizing that hand a little bit, but it was fighting with one hand for the majority of the fight. He was already taking a beating up to that point. Going forward from that aspect, it was not a pretty fight. Now, he did win round 5, and I think he was challenging in round 6, and then Mbilli finished him off pretty good in round 6, so I actually gave Mbilli the round there. I believe it was round 6 or 5. But, it was a tough fight. However, what a performance by him just to be able to thug it out, get that, to go to the distance was impressive. I don't think anybody expected that. Most people expected and thought they should have thrown the towel in. He let him live another day. But, he went on a shield. Will we see Derevyanchenko again? I don't know, because he obviously, does he want to go out like that? Probably not. But he has a great career. He's secured a lot of big fights in his life. He's not going to be able to go back to a championship opportunity, most likely. So this might have been the ending of that. However, I do want to talk about Christian Mbilli. There's 2 sides of this. He's now sitting in a position where he's 28-0. And, a lot of people I saw on Twitter were saying, or on X were saying, well, Christian Mbilli, he didn't get him knocked out. How do you not knock out a guy with one arm? Well, anybody that watched that fight is well aware that what Derevyanchenko was doing in that fight was clearly beyond what most people expected, right? A lot of people were not expecting him to be able to stay up that long. And he fought through that. and incredible grit, determination, and fashion. So I'm not going to put much of a blame on the fact they didn't get him KO'd and knocked him out there, but I do like his ability. Would I say that I walk away from that performance more excited about Mbilli than I was on Thursday? No. Would I say that I think he's a better fighter now than I would have said on Thursday? No. Do I think Mbilli is still a guy that's heavily on the rise, that's underrated to even a certain extent, and I would like to see him in a bigger fight and get a championship belt potentially? Absolutely. I think he's that good of a guy as a fighter, and I think there's a lot of big opportunities for him. And so I do think he's a very underrated fighter, and I think that he deserves that chance at a championship fight. That leads me to the point then, what's next for him? Because we know that 3 of the belts are now tied up by Canelo. One just got opened up, and obviously you go right to the big one. Is Canelo the guy to go fight? After that performance on Saturday, I don't think that's a good fight. I don't think you can market that well. I don't think it makes a lot of sense. He obviously also, I think his skill set and the way he fights plays right into Canelo. And so I'm not a big fan of that matchup today, or the next fight, I should say. So that could happen. It's possible, but Canelo's kind of in his own world doing what he wants to do at this point in time. And I don't know if that fight even makes sense to begin with. So then I shift my focus now, and you've got 2 guys that I really do like. First of all, Caleb Plant, and both these guys I'm going to say have already got fights scheduled next, but obviously they're coming up in the near future. So those 2 fights, Caleb Plant, I love that fight. I think that would be very appealing and interesting. And Jaime Munguia, I would also like to see that fight occur as well. Both those fights are very entertaining fights that I think would be interesting to see the outcome of. You could also see Diego Pacheco. He's another guy I could possibly be interesting to see him fight Christian Mbilli. But those are ultimately the kind of guys that I'm kind of keying in on, that I would hope and like to see Christian Mbilli fight. But I do think he is an underrated fighter. I think he's a good fighter, and I would love to see what he's got next. So it's going to be interesting to see what the next fight is, but he's a legit fighter. Not more impressed than I was on Thursday. However, I'm still very high on him, probably more high than I see a lot of people on him. I think he's got a lot of game. I think he deserves to be a champion and will be a champion in the future. All right. I saved one thing for last. That's Abdullah Mason. Let me just give a little intro here. Abdullah Mason, he is now 15-0. He has fought 4 times in 2024, all of them by KO. He has got another KO this past weekend in round 2 at the 40-second mark. This guy is only 20 years old, and he is 15-0. Is there even a debate for him really not being the best prospect in boxing right now? Listen, I know there's a lot of good guys out there, and not only America, but throughout the world that are, young and prospects working their way up. But you just talk about resume, you talk about production, talk about what he's done, you talk about the level he's fighting at right now. I don't see anybody else really fighting at this level. Abdullah Mason is legit. He is the truth. He's going to be a superstar. It's not even a matter of if, it's a matter of when he officially takes that next jump and becomes a true household superstar in the boxing game. There's not much to dispute or debate here. He is the best boxing prospect currently, and he's the guy that you look at right now, and the only question I'm asking is how quickly should he step up? At the end of the day, he is 20 years old, right? So that is he's a young guy in a grown man sport. You don't play boxing, you box. So that's something that you have to be concerned about. Throwing up against the top tier guys right now probably doesn't make a lot of sense, being the fact that he is 20. So you do want to make sure that you build him up the right way, get him to the point where he's fighting other good guys, but it's not too early yet. I think he's very talented, but it's obviously there's a gap between a grown man and a 20-year-old. So that's the only aspect that I'm looking at. It has nothing to do with skill. It just happens to go based around the power aspect and what you're capable of as a 20-year-old fighting grown men. But it's not, like I said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. They should build this resume up at the right way, get his body acclimated to each and every single level, continue to grow in fights, and do what he's doing right now. But all I will say is that there is going to be a day in the next not too distant future in which we will be talking about Abdullah Mason as one of the top pound for pound fighters in the world. He is that good. He is going to be the face of American boxing one day. He's going to be one of the top faces of boxing out there eventually. He is a special fighter, and I think we should be excited to watch him. He's got a guy that all of us Americans should be, like I said, we know he's going to be legit. Just let him work his way up the right way naturally, and we'll be able to watch him grow into becoming a household boxer in the not too distant future. So he is legit. He made a statement once again in his 4th fight of 2024, all by KOs. He is the real deal. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. Abdullah Mason is the real deal. All right, so that's a recap for what we've had in the fight world over the past weekend. And now I want to get into some news we've had. I hinted at it just a couple minutes ago. Alex Pereira has been announced to now be headlining Utah event. He'll be fighting Khalil Roundtree on October 5th, UFC 307, which will be taking place in Salt Lake City. Let's be honest here, folks, and it feels like everybody seems to be on agreement with this. I don't think this is going to be a fight that goes much longer than the past couple of fights for Pereira. In fact, it might be quicker than any of them. Well, maybe not Jamal Hill. I mean, that one went by pretty fast. But, this seems to be an easy fight that's just to stay active and busy for Pereira. And I get that. He earns that. We're talking about the face of UFC right now. And what he's done for the UFC this past year has been sensational. He deserves whatever he really wants. And this makes sense. It's going to be an interesting fight. Of course, Alex Pereira, we just see him again in 2024. That's exciting. But I think this is going to be an easy victory for Pereira. We'll preview that more as we get closer to that time. But, Pereira, he's legit. And we know that he's the real deal. I don't think that's going to be a fight that lasts very long. Other news we learned is that we go into a podcast. Tom Aspinall was on the BYM podcast, and he goes in on Jon Jones. Let me read this quote to you, then I'm going to break it down and dissect it for you guys. We know Jon Jones is a bit overweight these days. The guy was sat there with the Cheeto fingers, waiting for me to get knocked out so he could start tweeting about it. Since I won that fight, he's gone completely quiet. I will retire Jon Jones without even fighting him. I'm the best heavyweight in the world, and I'm not getting my credit for it. They're holding the belt hostage. I see no lies by what Tom Aspinall said right there. The truth is, and I talked about this, what was it? After the 304 breakdown, Tom Aspinall is the real deal. The fight we all want to see is Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones. Is that going to happen? I don't know. We know Stipe is going to be the fight that Jon Jones has next. Okay, it is what it is. But does Jon Jones fight after that again? I know Dana White says all these things about, he's for sure going to fight. He's going to be this big-time guy, and he's going to come back, and he wants to fight anybody at any time, all these different things. But is that really what Jon Jones is at? And I'm not trying to discredit him. Jon Jones is older now. Jon Jones is the guy that does deserve to be potentially retiring. He's one of the greatest, not the greatest UFC fighter to ever live. There's nothing that he needs to prove to anybody. And I completely understand where Jon Jones is coming from in this. But the point is that what Tom Aspinall said is that that's the fight we want to see. And there is a legitimate chance that, yes, Jon Jones does not want to fight Tom Aspinall. He's old. He doesn't really necessarily need that on his resume. It doesn't make too much sense for him. So be it. He might just retire because of Tom Aspinall. That's not out of the question at all what he said. And ultimately, at the other hand, they are holding the belt hostage from Tom Aspinall. He's an interim. He's already defended it. He's proven that he's a dominant guy. Jon Jones has fought one time in only a handful of years. He has not been very active, and he's been coming off an injury. He's older, but yet he still holds the belt. And I think a lot of us already identify Aspinall as the guy who technically is a champion right now. But, he's not officially the champion, and I think he deserves that. And so we'll see what ends up happening with that in that regard. Of course, we all want to see Aspinall versus Jon Jones, though. We know that's the story and the fact of the matter. Another bit of UFC news now. Dana White had an appropriate reaction to this storyline. Merab decided to go and get cut today in the eye, and he shows the video on social media. Not a good idea to say the least, because cuts are not a good thing in combat sports, as we all know. This is something that could obviously have detoured potentially the main event for the Sphere in UFC 306. One of the biggest events, one of the most put forth events that Dana White is the greatest combat event that Dana White claims to have will ever occur. And this could have been in danger. Now, thankfully, it all appears we're going to be all right. As he posted, calm down, it's all good. It's just a little training injury. Never pulled out of a fight and never will. I'm coming for you, O'Malley, stronger than ever. And then Dana White confirms that it's just a small cut. He's going to be A-okay. But like Dana White said, why? Why are you even posting it to begin with? It makes no sense. I know it's not necessarily a part of the body, hence like, an ankle or leg or something like that, or an arm injury where, they could easily target that. Either way, they're going to be targeting the face regardless. But why would you want anybody to know that? That's something that should not have gotten out, and I do not know why that even got out. And thankfully, I don't know how it exactly occurred directly. Obviously, we know that nobody said, but how do you even let that happen? Thankfully, we're still a few weeks out from this event even getting going, so it should all be good, but just something that I just don't see why that should have ever occurred. Thankfully, it does sound like the fight is going to be on, but I had to obviously address that. All right, a few more things before we wrap up this show tonight. The next few things will all come from an interview with Charlie Persons, in which he was interviewing His Excellency about boxing just a few days ago. Here's the first one. Turkey announced that Zhai Li Zhang versus Martin Bakole will be a fight that he's looking at doing. He wants it to be a headline of a potential Riyadh season card in China in the first week of December. Now, I believe that's been clarified, and Martin Bakole added on that it could also be in Africa, both of which would be interesting to see how that would come to fruition. But that's the fight I want to see. I said that on Thursday when Bakole announced the top guys he wants to go possibly fight. I said Zhai Li Zhang is the guy we want to see. Like, who else would you want to see him fight than that? You're going to have two guys that are about equal height and weight, two of the biggest guys in all of boxing. That's the type of fight we want to see. That's a perfect headline, and I know the rest of the card would be great, as we know that His Excellency puts together. So that's a fight that I'm excited to possibly go see what gets put together there. But that is the hope, have it be in December. Perfect. And I do want to have a little side note here. Are we starting to pick up on what His Excellency is starting to build here? We hinted at the potential boxing UFC version a little bit ago. And we look at the schedule now. August in LA. September will be in London. October will be in Saudi. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then you go, first week of December, most likely, you're going to go have the event that we just talked about potentially in China or Africa, whatever ends up being with Bakole and Zhang. And then you got the late December event with Tyson Fury and Usyk rematch. This is starting to clearly come together as an event situation where this is becoming like the UFC pay-per-view event of boxing. Just something to keep an eye on. I think this is obviously coming to fruition, and I think we can see how rapid things are changing in boxing. Just want to point those things out real quick. And I think that we can start to pick up on what His Excellency is building, and I'm all for it. Next aspect that they talked about in that interview. Turkey announced that he declared that he believes Terence Crawford only wants to fight Canelo Alvarez and doubts he'll accept his offer to face Virgil Ortiz next, saying, "I don't think Crawford will fight anyone except Canelo." All right. I have to do this because I'm going to be honest. It's the same exact response I'm going to give to what I said about Canelo just a few weeks ago. Bud Crawford is at a position in his career. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, an all-time great. He's accomplished incredible things. He's done magnificent things for the sport of boxing. He's at a position where he does not need to go fight anybody else if he wants to. He can just go have fun and do money fights, whatever the case may be. And I'm not going to say this yet because he has not been ducking fights for too long yet, as opposed to someone like Canelo. But if you're not going to fight anybody except for Canelo, does that mean that you're one fight and done? Or maybe two if you want to do a rematch of some sort? Because I thought that when we look at this 154 division, Bud Crawford could go in and become undisputed here now. A loaded division, a loaded weight class that has a lot of big fights to make. And Virgil Ortiz was one of the top guys there. So if he doesn't want that one, then what does he want? And there becomes a lot of concerns. And I think where we're seeing that is that a lot of these older fighters, they do have certain goals. And they are not interested in anything outside of that. They've gone through this career, they've done all the hard work, and they're at a position now where they say, you know what? I've got only a couple things I want to accomplish. It might just be to ride off in the sunset with a lot more wins on my win column. It might be I just want one more big money payday. It might be these certain aspects, but they've got their mindset on something specific, and that's all they want. And at the end of the day, these guys have given us everything they have. There's no reason they don't get to enjoy what they want. However, on the flip side, though, there comes a time where we might have to say then, okay, well, are you still one of the top guys if you're not going to be fighting the top guys or even fighting at all? Because if we go another year or 12 plus months without seeing Bud Crawford, he's now about 38 years old at that point. It's going to be tough to keep ranking him at that top group because of how inconsistent and active he is. So that's something I just have to be honest with. I said the same thing about Canelo. I'm not going to just change it up and switch it up for Bud Crawford now. Now, the other aspect that I want to address from the interview was this. His Excellency has said that they're close to deals for Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, Virgil Ortiz, and Williams Apita to fight on Riyadh season cards. Shakur likely versus Joe Cordina. Ortiz could be Israel Madrimov, Jaron Boots Ennis, or Tim Tszyu. A lot of fights moving. Essentially just clarified what he talked about and I talked about on Thursday in that statement of guys willing to work with. So a lot of big fights could be in the mix. And some of those fights that were actually just listed there is what got revealed today. And that's how I want to end today's show, discussing the card that was just released today. Let me pull it up for you guys and get this up on the screen now. Where we got it. Here we are. So here's the card that we currently have got released today. Now this is exciting. These cards are not ever to be messed with. These are special cards. Now, was the best card of the year compared to everything else that he's put together? Maybe not. I personally am a big fan of this. I'm excited because it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, I will say this: it could be a lot of 12-round fights. We picked a few guys here that don't necessarily go for the KOs. The main event is going to be a little bit of up in the air, and that's the one I've hyped up a lot already. I think it's going to be the fight of the year. But Beterbiev will go for the KO. If it's not the KO, then I think Bivol will win. It's going to be an interesting battle. They're very similar to the type of hypothetical fight we've talked about, broken down the show between Shakur and Tank. So that's going to be interesting. But this card is special. I'm going to start off with the ones that I'm very high on. We start off with Ben Whitaker, Liam Cameron. Ben Whitaker is one of the quickest rising guys, one of the top prospects, a guy that I'm a huge fan of. The Drunken Master style. He is a special fighter, and this is another good fight for him. Gets to be on a massive stage now in Riyadh season. Saudi Arabia, I think this is the fight that's going to be exciting to watch him perform in and see what he does. Get to see him on another world stage because he is an up-and-coming superstar. Already is a superstar branding-wise, but start to get that more and more respect within the boxing world. Then we head over to the next event in that card, and you're going to have Jai Opetaia, a guy that I think is incredible. However, this is a tough fight. I think this is the one that a lot of people are overlooking. He's fighting Jack Macy. Now, I will say Jai is going to win this fight in my early prediction here. However, this is a fight that's very interesting to watch. I'm excited to see what could go down here because you got two guys that are very, very talented. Jai Opetaia, I think, is a legitimate star in the making. He's going to be champion in multiple belts eventually. He is the real deal. But Max is not going to be an easy fight. I don't believe so. So then we go into the next event, Fabio Wardley, Fraser Clark 2. This was a discussed fight potentially occurring that I discussed on Thursday. You can't not like this. This was on Easter weekend when this fight last occurred. A 12-round brawl, big time fight. Excited to see number 2 on this one. Now, I would say, since His Excellency obviously had this connection here and was working on this fight, I'm a little shocked it didn't go down in September in the London one. However, that would have obviously been home for them, would have been great, but it is what it is. I'll take it here then as well. Then you get to a fight that I'm a little bit perplexed about. It's interesting. It's a good fight, but, especially this is where it gets a little interesting because there's a couple of these fights that I said, I don't know if we're going to see a lot of KOs in this card, but you get to a position where you have Chris Eubanks Jr. He's going to be fighting Camille Shermanetta, and, this is a good fight overall, but it is a little bit interesting to have this added on there. I wouldn't say I'm the most excited about this fight. Obviously the winner moves and elevates himself up and makes the name bigger overall, but it's not the biggest fight I've ever seen in the world. So that is a good fight though overall, but I'm not too sure when you have the next fight I'm going to announce and talk about here in a second. But then you have the co-main event, Shakur Stevenson, Joe Cordina. And I also broke down this discussion on the Thursday show as well. When I said this was the rumored fight to occur, Shakur is the best defensive fighter in boxing right now, in my opinion. Shakur is an elite fighter, and I think that people undervalue him and don't like him because he's not flashy, he's not entertaining, he doesn't get the KOs, so on and so forth. But Shakur Stevenson is the real deal. We know that. And if you know boxing, you can see that quite obviously. He's fighting Joel Cordina, who just got KO'd in his last fight. Decent fighter, but nothing near Shakur's fight. This is the easiest thing to bet on. Obviously it's boxing, anything can happen. Shakur's winning this fight in ease, without a doubt. And what I look at here is, could it grow as global branding by being on the Riyadh season card, fighting a big UK guy? Sure. But, I don't think this is the fight that a lot of people wanted to see. But if we can't get the Shakur and Tank fight, then, what else do you really have set for that point? What I will say, though, is what I wanted to originally see was, can we get the belts all along between Shakur and Tank and then get them to head off in the undisputed fight that I mentioned before? This is not a step in that direction. So I'll see what happens. Maybe it's just the first step to be with His Excellency. And from there, we can get some big fights going on for after that. But then the main event that we've already known about for a long time now, Beterbiev, Bivol, that's going to be with the fight of the year, in my opinion. You have two guys that are elite, two guys that at the time when they were supposed to fight just a few months ago, they were supposedly going to be, about 3 and 4 ranked in the world. This was before Usyk became undisputed. That didn't occur due to the torn meniscus for Beterbiev. However, this is going to be a classic. And I'll preview this a lot more as we get closer to the event. Obviously, we're still a long way away. However, this is a fight that's going to be special. And this is what it's going to come down to. Undisputed light heavyweight championship of the world. It's going to be one of the biggest events that we'll have this year. A massive, massive fight. And that's what I'm talking about as a main event. So obviously this card, when you look at it from top to bottom, it's got a lot of question marks a little bit. It might be a card that drags on for a few hours, just to keep it real, right? But at the end of the day, this is going to be an interesting card. a lot of famous big names, a lot of exciting fights you could get there, especially for people that love boxing and love the fundamentals of it. You're going to get a lot of that night. So it's certainly going to be an interesting night. Another massive, massive Saudi Arabian card put together by His Excellency. And that will be a fun thing to watch. So that's what I got for you guys today, though. I appreciate everybody for tuning in here now. I believe it's about 4:30 in the morning Eastern time. It is 1:30 in the morning here, my time. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. For whoever did tune in throughout the duration of this show, I appreciate all you guys, and whoever does check in on the show and watch it later on another point in time. I appreciate you guys for tuning in as well. God bless you guys all. I should be seeing you guys on Thursday. I'm not 100% sure, but it should be a Thursday show. But I'll see you guys in hopefully just a couple of days. God bless you guys. I'll see you guys soon.